The courtroom was buzzing with whispers. The sound of shuffling papers, squeaking shoes, and low voices filled the air. People sat on the wooden benches, some waiting for their own hearings, others simply curious about the case. The large room smelled faintly of old books and polish. Light streaming in through tall windows onto the polished wooden floor. In the middle of the room, behind the high desk, the judge sat with an air of authority. His black robe hung heavily, and his sharp eyes scanned the papers in front of him. To his left, clerks were arranging files, and to his right, a bailiff stood tall, his hands crossed firmly. It was the same kind of setting everyone had seen in movies. Yet today, something unusual caught people's attention. The heavy doors at the back of the room creaked open. All eyes turned. A young black teenager walked in. Her steps were small, almost hesitant. Her clothes were simple, not polished like a lawyer's suit. She clutched a worn folder tightly against her chest as if it were her only protection. Her name was Maya, and though her heart was beating fast, she tried her best to keep her face calm. The room stirred with murmurs. People whispered to each other. "She's just a kid," someone said. "What is she doing here without a lawyer?" Another voice added. Maya heard the whispers, but she kept walking slowly toward the front. The sound of her footsteps echoed across the floor, reminding her that all eyes were on her when she finally stood before the judge. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The judge looked down at her, his eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. Then, to the shock of many in the room, he let out a short laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh, but the kind that dismissed her completely. "You must be joking," he said with a smirk, his voice carried across the room. "This case is serious, and they send me a child." A ripple of laughter spread through the audience. Some people tried to hide their chuckles behind their hands, but others laughed openly. The sound made Maya's cheeks burn. She lowered her eyes for a moment, staring at the folder in her hands. Her grip tightened. She wanted to disappear. But at the same time, a small fire lit inside her chest. The judge leaned back in his chair, still amused. "Young lady, do you even understand why you're here?" His tone was mocking, his smile sharp. The clerks exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or to remain serious. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Maya raised her head slowly. Her eyes met the judge's, and though her voice trembled slightly, she answered, "Yes, Your Honor. I understand why I'm here." Her words silenced the laughter for a moment. No one expected her to respond so firmly. But the judge chuckled again, shaking his head. "Well, this will be interesting," he said. He tapped his pen against the desk, clearly amused by the idea of a teenager standing before him, trying to speak for herself in the back of the room. A woman whispered to her neighbor, "She's going to embarrass herself." "Poor girl," another man muttered. "This will be over in 5 minutes." Maya heard the whispers, but she didn't let her gaze drop again. She stood still, the folder pressed tightly to her chest. Her mind replayed every moment that led her here. Every late night she had spent reading, every page of research she had pored over, every tear she had wiped away when she thought she couldn't do it. Now was the time to prove she could. The judge sighed loudly. "All right then. Let's hear it," he said, still sounding amused. He motioned for the clerk to prepare the notes. The room quieted, waiting for the girl to speak. For a second, Maya's throat felt dry. Her heart beat so loudly, she thought everyone could hear it. She could still feel the judge's laugh lingering in the air like an insult. But behind the fear was something stronger. She knew she didn't come here by accident. She had a reason. And that reason was more important than his laughter. The audience leaned forward, some still smirking, others curious. It was not every day that a teenager stood in court, especially one who dared to face a judge alone. The moment stretched long, every tick of the clock echoing through the silent room, and then Maya took a step forward, raised her chin, and opened her mouth to speak. Her voice was steady now, carrying across the courtroom. Every eye stayed fixed on her. The laughter faded. The whispers stopped. For the first time, the judge himself leaned slightly forward, no longer laughing, but waiting. What began as a joke to everyone in that courtroom was about to turn into something none of them would ever forget. The courtroom was still buzzing after Maya's first words. The judge leaned back in his chair, amused, his lips curled into a smirk. He tapped the gavel softly, not to restore order, but almost as if he was mocking the seriousness of the moment. "So, Miss Maya," he said slowly, drawing out her name, "you think you're ready to stand here and argue your case? Without a lawyer? Without experience?" The audience chuckled again. Their laughter wasn't loud this time, but it was sharp, cruel. Like little blades cutting into Maya's confidence, a woman in the back whispered, "She'll break down in a minute." Another man muttered, "This is ridiculous. They should just throw it out." Maya's hands trembled slightly against the folder she held. Her palms were sweaty. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The judge's laughter, the audience's smirks. The whispers, it was all pressing down on her like a heavy weight. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But she forced herself to stay still. The judge chuckled again, this time looking out at the courtroom as if sharing a private joke with the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing, "this is the first time I've had a teenager walk into my courtroom and claim she knows better than the law." What an unusual day. His words stung. They weren't spoken in kindness. They were entertainment for the crowd. Emma took a deep breath. "Your Honor," she began softly. Her voice shook at first, and that gave the crowd more courage to laugh. Someone snorted from the back. The sound echoed in the room. Her cheeks burned. But she didn't lower her eyes this time. She lifted her chin and tried again. "I may not have a lawyer, but I came prepared." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Unimpressed? Prepared," he repeated, drawing the word out. "With what? A school essay? Do you think standing here is like giving a presentation in your classroom?" The laughter that followed was louder this time. Even spilling into the clerk's corner, the bailiff shifted, clearly uncomfortable, but he said nothing. Maya's throat tightened. Her fingers dug into the folder so hard the edges bent. She wanted to shout back, to defend herself. But she knew if she lost control, they would win. Instead, she took a long breath and forced her voice to stay calm. "I may not be a lawyer," she said. "A little stronger this time, but I know the truth. And I can prove it." The room quieted just slightly. Her words cut through the laughter, not silencing it completely, but softening it. The judge narrowed his eyes, still smirking, but curious now. "And what truth is that, young lady?" Maya hesitated, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she could feel the weight of this moment. Every eye was on her, judging her, waiting for her to stumble. The laughter still lingered in the air, but she could feel something shifting beneath it. She opened her folder slowly. The sound of papers sliding against each other, filling the silence. The courtroom leaned in without realizing it. "These are documents, Your Honor," she said. "Records, statements, and evidence." Her voice was quiet, but steady now. The laughter faded a little more, curiosity slipping into the room. The judge leaned forward slightly, his smirk faltering. "And where, may I ask? Did a teenager like you get these?" Maya's heart thudded, but she didn't back down. She looked straight into the judge's eyes. "I found them because no one else would. I studied, I researched. I worked for this moment." The room grew quieter. The audience, who once laughed, began to whisper instead. Not mocking now, but uncertain. One man muttered, "Where did she get all that?" Another woman shook her head. "She's just a kid." But she didn't finish the sentence. The judge tapped his pen against the desk, his amusement faltering. But he wasn't ready to show respect either. "This isn't a game, girl," he said sharply. "Law is not child's play. You think a few pieces of paper will save you." Maya's chest rose and fell with her deep breaths. She could feel the laughter and scorn still around her. But something inside her had shifted. Her voice no longer trembled as she replied, "I don't just think it, Your Honor. I know it. Because the truth doesn't care if I'm a child or an adult. The truth is the truth." The room went still. For the first time since she walked in, the laughter stopped completely. The judge's smirk faded just a little, replaced with something else, something between annoyance and interest. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Unsure of what to expect next, Maya closed her folder and held it tightly again. Her voice softer now but unshaken. "You may laugh at me, Your Honor. But you won't laugh at the truth when you hear it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. And though the judge still sat high on his bench, the power in the room had shifted slightly. The crowd that once mocked her now waited, curious, maybe for the first time. They were starting to wonder if this teenager was more than they thought. The courtroom was still buzzing, but the laughter had begun to fade. The judge's smirk lingered. Yet there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes now. He tapped the gavel once. Not to silence Maya, but as if testing her. "Go ahead then," he said in a mocking tone. "Let's hear what this brave young lady has to say." Maya's knees trembled beneath her. But she kept her shoulders straight. She could still hear the echo of the audience's cruel laughter in her ears. She remembered the way the judge had dismissed her like she was nothing. That pain was still there, sharp and heavy. But behind it burned something stronger, a fire that told her she had to keep going. She placed the worn folder on the desk in front of her and slowly opened it. The papers inside were neat, carefully arranged. She had spent countless nights preparing them, nights when others were asleep. Nights when she was too tired to keep her eyes open but forced herself anyway, because she knew someday she would need them. "I may not be a lawyer, Your Honor," Maya said. Her voice was steady now. Her words didn't tremble. "But I know my rights, and I know the truth. And the truth doesn't change because I'm young." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. People were no longer laughing, they were leaning forward. Listening, the clerk stopped scribbling for a moment. Surprised by the calm strength in her voice, even the bailiff, who had remained stone-faced since the beginning, raised his eyebrows slightly. The judge leaned forward, his amusement fading into irritation. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned. "This is not a classroom debate. This is a court of law." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "I know, and that's why I'm here. I have evidence. And I will be heard." The judge opened his mouth to reply. But for the first time, he hesitated. Something about the teenager's tone unsettled him. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone so young. He leaned back again, folding his arms. "Very well," he said at last. "Proceed." Maya took a deep breath. The weight of the room pressed down on her, but she felt something shift power. She had been humiliated, laughed at, mocked. But she had not backed down. That realization gave her strength. She held up the first paper from her folder. "This," she said, "is the statement everyone ignored. A statement that proves what really happened." Her words rang clear in the silent courtroom. The audience stirred, some exchanged glances. Others whispered quietly. A man in the back muttered, "Where did she get that?" Another woman whispered, "She's not joking. She actually came prepared." The judge frowned, glancing at the document in her hand. He hadn't expected this. He had expected her to stutter, to crumble, to give up. But here she was, standing firm with evidence in her hand. Her confidence was beginning to chip away at his arrogance. Maya's eyes swept over the room. Everyone laughed when I walked in, she said softly. Because I don't look like I belong here. But the truth doesn't care how old I am. The truth doesn't care what I look like. And the truth is that what happened to me was wrong. And I can prove it. Her words silenced the last of the whispers. For the first time, the room listened, really listened. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her of the nights she had studied. The nights she cried but kept going. One day, her mother had said, "Your voice will matter," and now, here she was. Proving her mother right, the judge shifted uncomfortably, tapping his pen against the desk. His smirk was gone, replaced by a tighter expression. He cleared his throat. "Miss Maya, the court will review your documents, but remember, evidence is not enough without credibility, and you." He trailed off, looking her over once more. But the words he wanted to say mocking her again stuck in his throat, because even he could see it now. This teenager wasn't breaking down. She wasn't begging for mercy. She was standing her ground. Her voice clear and unwavering, her presence commanded the room in a way he hadn't expected. Ethan, her younger cousin, sitting in the back, watched with wide eyes. Pride swelling in his chest. He had always believed Maya was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. And now everyone else was seeing it too. The judge finally leaned forward. His voice quieter now. "Very well, continue." Maya nodded. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she simply turned another page in her folder. Her heart still raced, but she felt steady, firm. She had taken the first step, she had faced their laughter, their doubt, their scorn, and she had not fallen. And for the first time since she walked into the courtroom, the silence wasn't against her, it was hers. Asterisk, the air in the courtroom had shifted. The laughter was gone now, replaced by silence so heavy that even the sound of Maya turning a page seemed loud. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. The same people who had mocked her minutes ago were now watching with uneasy curiosity. Maya's fingers shook slightly as she lifted the next document. But her voice did not. "This," she said clearly, "is a copy of the hospital report from the night of the incident." She placed it on the desk for the judge to see. The paper was old, its corners bent from being handled too many times. But every word was still clear. The judge leaned forward, frowning. He wasn't smirking anymore. He adjusted his glasses and glanced at the page. His eyes flickered quickly over the lines. His expression tightened. He hadn't expected the girl to bring real documents, much less something this specific. From the benches behind, whispers began again. But this time, they were different. Not mocking, but stunned. Where did she get that? A woman whispered. How did she find it? Maya's heart raced, but she forced herself to keep going. Everyone believed I was lying, she said, her voice calm but strong. But this report shows details that were ignored. Details that prove my story. The judge cleared his throat. Trying to maintain authority, young lady. How exactly did you obtain this document? His voice wasn't mocking anymore, it was sharp. Demanding. Maya met his eyes without flinching. I studied, she replied simply. I searched, I asked, I filed requests. I worked for months until someone finally gave me access. Because if no one else was going to fight for me, I had to fight for myself. The room stirred again. People leaned forward, hungry to hear more. The bailiff, who had been stone-faced the entire time, looked at her with quiet respect now. Even the clerk stopped writing, their pens frozen above their papers. Maya opened another page, her hand steadied as she spoke. This is a witness statement, signed and dated. Ignored in the original hearing, it was buried. But it tells the truth of what really happened that night. She held it up. Her voice steady, and this witness saw everything. The judge's jaw tightened. He took the paper, scanning it quickly. His brow furrowed deeper with every line. The audience waited. their silence sharp with anticipation. Maya didn't stop. She laid down yet another paper. This is the financial record payments that no one could explain. Money that connects directly to the corruption in this case. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. People exchanged wide-eyed looks. Someone whispered, "She's exposing something big." Another muttered, "This isn't just a teenager talking, she's unraveling the whole case." The judge tried to compose himself, but his voice betrayed his unease. "Miss Maya, these are serious claims," he said. "Do you realize the weight of what you're presenting?" Maya nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor, I realize it. That's why I brought proof, because for too long, people thought they could laugh at me, silence me, or ignore me. But the truth doesn't go away, it waits. And it always comes out." The words echoed in the room like a challenge. No one dared laugh now. The same people who had mocked her minutes ago were holding their breath. Waiting for the next revelation, Maya turned to the audience for a moment, her eyes scanning the room when I walked in. "You all thought I was just a child who didn't belong here," she said. Her voice carried strength now. "But I belong here because the truth belongs here. And I won't stop until it's heard." The room erupted in a low murmur. People shifting uncomfortably, their earlier arrogance melted into guilt and awe. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed of their laughter. Others couldn't look away, captivated by the courage standing before them. The judge tapped his gavel once, trying to regain control. "Order in the court," he said. But his voice lacked its earlier smugness. He looked at Maya again. No longer with mockery, but with a strange mixture of caution and respect. Maya placed the last paper on the desk, her voice soft but unshaken. "This is everything they didn't want you to see," she said. "And now it's here, in front of everyone. You can laugh at me, Your Honor, but you cannot laugh at the evidence." The silence that followed was unlike any before. It wasn't heavy with mockery or doubt, but with realization for the first time. Everyone understood that this teenager wasn't here to play games or seek attention. She was here to uncover the truth. The judge leaned back in his chair slowly. His face was pale, his hands tight around the papers. He looked down at them, then back up at Maya. His lips pressed into a thin line. The smirk was gone, replaced by something else entirely uneasy. Maya stood tall, the folder still clutched in her hands. Her heart was still pounding, but she felt stronger than ever. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like a child. She felt like someone who had a voice, and that voice had finally been heard. And though the outcome was not yet decided, one thing was clear. The laughter that had filled the courtroom at her expense was gone. And in its place was silence, the kind of silence that comes only when truth has been laid bare. The courtroom sat frozen. Every eye was fixed on Maya. The pile of documents she had placed on the judge's desk was more than anyone had expected. No one laughed anymore, not even quietly. The atmosphere had changed, thick with tension and anticipation. It was as if everyone in the room knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. The judge shifted in his chair, his hands clutching the papers tightly. His earlier arrogance was gone, but his pride kept him from admitting it. "Miss Maya," he said, his voice firmer now, "you've presented many things today, but evidence alone does not explain you. Who are you to bring all of this here? What gives you the right?" The question echoed across the room. Maya felt her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, she closed her eyes, breathing slowly. She had prepared for this moment. She had dreamed of it. She had feared it. Now it was here. When she opened her eyes again, they shone with determination. Her voice was soft but steady. "You want to know who I am, Your Honor?" "I'll tell you." The audience leaned forward. Some whispered anxiously, "What is she going to say?" Others simply held their breath. Maya took one step forward. Clutching her folder to her chest, "I am not just a teenager standing here alone," she began. Her words were calm, but carried a strength that filled the room. "I am the daughter of a woman who was silenced. A woman who fought for the truth until it destroyed her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The judge's eyes flickered. But he didn't interrupt. Maya continued, her voice trembling only slightly. "My mother believed in justice. She believed in fairness. She believed in this very system." She looked around the courtroom, her gaze sharp, but this system failed her. She brought evidence. She begged to be heard. But she was laughed at, dismissed, ignored. Just like I was when I walked in here today. Her words pierced the silence. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed of how they had laughed moments earlier. Maya's voice grew stronger. "My mother died without justice. She died believing her truth would never be heard. But before she died, she gave me everything. Her notes, her files, her records," she told me. "One day, Maya, they will listen to you, even if they never listen to me." Tears shimmered in her eyes. But she refused to let them fall. She held her head high. "That day is today, and I am here, not just for myself, but for her." The judge's hand stilled on the gavel. His eyes, once mocking, were now heavy with something else, guilt. Maybe even respect. Maya lifted one of the papers again. "You laughed at me because I look young, because I don't wear a suit, because I don't have a lawyer standing beside me," she said. "But I have something stronger. I have the truth. And I have the will to fight for it, the same will my mother had until her last breath." The crowd was silent. Some people in the back wiped their eyes. The bailiff, who had barely moved since the trial began, gave a slow nod, acknowledging her courage. The judge cleared his throat, but his voice was softer now. "So this is personal," he said quietly. "This is not just a case. This is your fight." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "It's more than personal, Your Honor. It's justice. And justice doesn't depend on my age, or my clothes, or your laughter. Justice depends on the truth, and I've brought it here. Right in front of you." Her words filled the room with a power no one expected from a teenager. The same girl who had been mocked, belittled, and laughed at was now standing tall, her voice carrying like an echo of her mother's. The audience sat in stunned silence, the judge himself leaning back. Unable to look away for the first time, the power no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. Maya closed her folder slowly. "You asked who I am," she said, her voice clear. "I am Maya. I am the daughter of the woman you ignored. I am the girl you laughed at. I am the truth you tried to bury. And I am not leaving until you listen." The words struck like lightning. A hush fell over the courtroom so deep that even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed loud. The judge's face was pale now. His pride struggled against the weight of her words. His gavel hovered over the desk, but he did not strike it. His eyes dropped to the papers she had brought, evidence he could no longer dismiss. And for the first time since the trial began, the judge was silent, not because he wanted to mock her, but because he had nothing left to say. The judge sat frozen, his gavel resting uselessly on the desk. The courtroom was so silent that Maya could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. The girl he had laughed at, the child he had mocked, now stood in front of him, commanding the entire room. He looked down at the papers she had laid before him. His fingers traced the lines of text, the signatures, the stamps of authenticity. At first, he searched for flaws, for something he could dismiss to protect his pride. But the more he read, the tighter his chest grew. The evidence was real, undeniable. It matched details that had been buried for years. Details he himself had once chosen to overlook. A memory stirred inside him, unwelcome and sharp. He remembered the case, her mother's case, the woman who had stood here years ago. Pleading for truth, he had laughed then too. Dismissing her as dramatic, he told himself the evidence wasn't strong enough. He told himself it wasn't worth the court's time. And now here was her daughter, standing in the same place, exposing not only the truth, but his own failure. The audience sat in uneasy silence, watching the judge closely. They had expected him to explode in anger. To shut Maya down, instead, he seemed smaller now. The weight of his past decisions pressing down on him. His mocking smile was gone, replaced by something raw shame. Maya's eyes never left him. Her voice was steady. "You remember, don't you?" She asked softly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. "You remember my mother. You remember her case. You remember laughing at her too." The judge's hand tightened around his pen until it almost snapped. He looked at her, but he couldn't speak. The truth was carved into his memory, and no denial could erase it. The audience shifted, gasping quietly. Some exchanged looks of shock. Others whispered, "He knows her mother." He was the judge before. The weight of the revelation spread through the room like fire. Maya stepped closer, her voice rising. She begged you to see the truth. She gave you the same evidence I'm giving you now. And you ignored it, you laughed at her, you silenced her. And because of that, she lost everything. Tears threatened to fall. But she held them back. She would not break here. Not in front of him. And when she died, people said she was foolish, crazy. They said her fight was worthless, but she was right. And you knew it? The judge's face turned pale. His lips parted as if to argue, but the words wouldn't come. His chest rose and fell heavily. His hands trembled. He looked down again at the papers, and for the first time in years, he saw the evidence not as something to dismiss, but as something undeniable. The bailiff, who had stood silently for most of the hearing, shifted closer, his eyes locked on the judge. His usual mask of neutrality cracked, and for a moment he looked almost disgusted. The audience could no longer stay still. A woman muttered loudly, "Is it true? Did he really ignore her mother's case?" Another man shook his head. "If that's true, he's guilty too," murmurs swelled. Shame and anger building against the man who once laughed with authority, but now sat exposed. The judge slammed the gavel once, but the sound lacked power. His voice wavered. "Order in the court." He barked, but no one was laughing anymore. No one feared his voice. Maya's own voice rang louder. Stronger. "You wanted to know who I am? I am proof that the truth cannot stay buried. I am proof that your laughter cannot erase justice. I am my mother's voice. And today you will hear it whether you want to or not." The courtroom erupted not with laughter, but with applause. It began softly. A few hands clapping hesitantly, but soon it grew. People who had once mocked her now stood in respect. The sound filled the room, drowning out the judge's trembling gavel. He looked around, his face drained of color. He had lost control of the courtroom, but more than that, he had lost control of his own image. The mocking, powerful figure he once was had been stripped bare. His arrogance shattered, replaced by humiliation and guilt. For the first time in his long career, the judge felt powerless. And it wasn't the law that had taken his power, was the truth spoken by a teenager he had laughed at. Maya stood firm, her folder still clutched to her chest. Her heart was racing, but she didn't waver. She had come here for justice, not for applause. She had come here to finish what her mother had started, and as she looked at the judge, she knew she had done it. The judge lowered his head, his voice breaking as he whispered, "I remember her. I remember everything." The room went silent again. His confession was quiet, but it carried louder than any gavel strike. For the first time, the judge was no longer in control. The truth had taken the stand, and the teenager he mocked had become the one to deliver justice. The courtroom sat in a heavy silence after the judge's whisper. His admission was quiet, but it echoed louder than anything spoken that day. The people who had come expecting a quick hearing, or even a bit of entertainment, now sat frozen, realizing they had just witnessed something far greater. Maya stood tall, her folder still clutched against her chest. She felt her knees trembling, her heart racing, but she did not let it show. She had carried her mother's fight on her shoulders for years, and now the truth had been spoken where it mattered most. The judge lifted his eyes slowly. His face was pale, his pride shattered. His gavel, once a symbol of power, now looked like nothing more than a piece of wood in his trembling hand. "Miss Maya," he began, his voice breaking. "I owe you an apology." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. No one had expected those words, a judge apologizing to a teenager. It was unheard of, yet here it was, right in front of them. "I laughed at you," he continued, his voice heavy with shame, "just as I laughed at your mother years ago. I dismissed her, I dismissed you, and in doing so, I dismissed the truth. For that, I am deeply sorry." Maya's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment for so long, not just for herself, but for her mother. She wanted to cry, but she held her tears back. She stood straighter, her voice calm. "You don't need to apologize to me. Your Honor, you need to apologize to her memory, and to everyone who was denied justice because you chose to laugh instead of listen." The audience stirred. People nodded, their eyes wide with respect. Even those who had mocked her earlier now looked at her with admiration. Some clapped softly, unable to contain the pride they felt for the courage she showed. The judge lowered his head, whispering, "You are right." Then, louder so the entire courtroom could hear, he said, "Let the record show that this court recognizes the validity of the evidence presented by Miss Maya. The case will be reopened and investigated fully. No more dismissals. No more silence." The words hit like thunder. The courtroom erupted not with laughter this time, but with applause and shouts of approval. People rose to their feet, clapping, some even cheering. The same crowd that had laughed at her when she walked in was now standing in awe. Maya finally allowed herself a small smile. Not of pride, but of relief. She had done it. She had turned humiliation into triumph. She had made them listen. Her mother's voice had not been lost to live through her. The bailiff, who had stood stoic the entire trial, gave her a respectful nod, his eyes, usually unreadable, softened as he mouthed the word, "Well done." The clerks, who had earlier smirked at her, now hurried to record every word, their faces serious, their pens flying across the pages. The judge set down his gavel slowly, almost as if he no longer had the right to hold it. "Miss Maya," he said, his voice steadier now, "you have taught this court and me a lesson I will never forget. Justice is not about who looks the part or who holds the title. Justice is about truth. And today, you brought it here with more courage than I have ever seen." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. A woman in the back whispered, "She's stronger than any lawyer I've seen," a man added. "She's changed everything." Maya finally exhaled. She looked out at the crowd, at the people who had once mocked her but now stood clapping for her. And though she could feel the weight of their respect, she didn't let it consume her. She didn't fight for their applause. She fought for her mother, for justice, for truth. She turned her eyes back to the judge one last time. "Remember this moment," she said softly but firmly. "Because laughter is easy, but listening is harder. Next time someone comes before you with the truth, listen. Don't wait until it's too late." Her words struck like a final blow. The judge nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will," he said, and for the first time, his voice carried no arrogance, only humility. As the hearing ended, Maya walked out of the courtroom with her head held high. The same wooden doors that had opened to laughter now closed behind her to applause. The hallways outside buzzed with voices, reporters scribbling notes, strangers reaching out to shake her hand. People calling her brave, but Maya didn't stop to bask in it. She simply walked forward, her steps steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She whispered under her breath, "We did it. Mama, the fight wasn't over. The investigation would continue. The truth would spread, but Maya knew she had won the hardest battle already. She had silenced the laughter. She had made them see. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. Courage doesn't always come with age, and truth doesn't need permission to be heard. As she disappeared through the courthouse doors into the sunlight, the story of the teenager who stood against a judge was already spreading. And those who once mocked her would never forget the day Maya turned their laughter into silence, their silence into respect.